Welcome to the Line Movement MMA Betting Show. I'm Daniel Levy from Best Fight Picks and Half the Battle, joined now by Dan Tom of MMA Junkie and the Protect Your Neck podcast. Today, we're going to be diving into this upcoming UFC Fight Island card where Robert Whittaker meets Darren Till in the middleweight main event. And Dan, it's an exciting fight for so many reasons. Obviously, the former champion, Robert Whittaker, his first fight after his title loss, and Darren Till, his second fight at 185 pounds. It's going down this Saturday night, Dan.
You know, the lines are crazy all over, but I think in relation to the main card, the main attraction, Till versus Whittaker, you nailed it, Dan. And I think that line, whether or not we'll talk about it's justifiably close, I think if we're going by an excitement level, yeah, man, it's got potential fireworks written all over it.
You alluded to the line, so fear not, our watchers, our listeners. Thank you all very much. Robert Whittaker minus 130. The comeback on Darren Till is plus 110. So it's a closely lined fight. You know, somewhat of a pick 'em with a slight lean on Whittaker. You got to pay a little extra juice for the former champion. And, you know, there's so many different ways to attack this fight, so many angles to look at. I mean, firstly, historically speaking, when the champions come back, the first fight after losing their title, they don't always look as good. I mean, you remember a fight between Tyron Woodley and Gilbert Burns. That was Tyron Woodley's first fight back after the title loss, and none of us even recognized him in the octagon that night. So here with Robert Whittaker, it's so intriguing because, like, I feel like this is a stylistic matchup which is favorable towards Whittaker. It's just, are we guaranteed the same Robert Whittaker that we all know and love, Dan?
That's the big question. And I like that you bring that up because I believe it was just last week's show, Dan, and me and you have discussed this multiple times before, but we always talk about that weird rub you get after a title fight. Last week, we spoke about it from the challenger perspective on how you can kind of, get trapped, if you will. And, whether it's the fighter getting trapped thinking they're, higher up than they really are, or the better supporting them thinking they're higher up than they really are. But you mentioned now it's from the champion perspective. Now it's the turnaround fight from the champion who loses the bout. You brought up the great example with Burns and Woodley, and it's something to worry about because it's like a layered intangible, if you will, right? Because not only do you have to deal with that, sometimes you have people overinflating. I don't know if it's the case this time because even before Whittaker lost the belt to Adesanya, people were already questioning Robert Whittaker for the pullouts, the injuries. Where's he at? Despite his age, he's been through a lot of wars, 10 rounds with Romero. So we still got that even more so now that he's coming off of a devastating knockout loss to the champ Israel Adesanya. You know, where is he there? I don't think those conversations have really died down much. In fact, they probably have gone up.
Those things, and I'm glad you brought up the Yoel Romero fights, which, by the way, 10 of the best rounds in UFC history, Dan Tom. But, after that fight, or after those fights, rather, I said, look, Robert Whittaker and Yoel Romero are most likely not going to come back the same. And with Yoel Romero, even though I'm slightly wrong because it still looked like Yoel in his subsequent fights, the results say he lost his next two fights. So, I mean, he lost to Paulo Borrachina and to Israel Adesanya his next two fights. And with Whittaker, his next fight, he got knocked out. And, we can say on paper he got knocked out, one time because it was only one fight. But between you and me, Dan, he got knocked out twice in that fight, at the end of the first round and in the second round. So I'm not really sure where his head's at right now. And with Darren Till, he already had his embarrassing losses and he overcame them. So he's got to be riding high on confidence right now, knowing that he made his middleweight debut and took out a top 5 guy in the first fight at 185.
All fair things that you mentioned, all fair things that I mentioned and that we're talking about here, Dan. However, tipping my hand and maybe even pushing forward toward who I'm leaning to, I think that when those are the only things you have to worry about, and it's not the only things, we'll talk about the techniques of striking here in 1 second, I'm sure. But when those are the only things you have to worry about, I honestly worry whether it's me, myself, you, the listener audience out there. Thank you again. Give this video a like. Make sure you're subscribing to our channel, Line Movement, over here at the Line Movement MMA show. I always worry about overinflating these things, right? Because again, the kid is only 28. And although I believe mileage outweighs age on paper, I'm all about that argument. That being said, everything has a limit and we need to be careful. Maybe not. I mean, I could be wrong. Maybe he does come out here and, and so there's something with the chin. But unless it's something chin related, Dan, I guess is what I'm trying to say. I don't know if we have to worry about his head so much, because something I brought up in last week's show, right, Dan? I cited Rose Namajunas, and I talked about it with Jack Hermanson, although I didn't take my own advice. So I'm not going to bump my chest. But the point was, these fighters who have admitted, and bravely so, we're not coming at them. They've admitted that they've went through, anxiety, performance anxieties, or mental struggles, if you will, for lack of a better words. These people are doing better during pandemic times. Again, it's less media. You don't got the uvamohe or any crazy woos or crowds coming at you. And I think I would argue that these fighters, if not outright winning, are putting on really good performances, and performances where they don't only win, but they get shook up, whether it's Rose getting shook up in the third or Hermanson getting shook up in the beginning of the first. We've seen it break them before. They're not getting broken this time. So unless it's a chin-related issue, I think Whittaker shows up mentally in a competitive space.
Those two specific examples you brought up, because I feel like they can totally be debatable. And on paper, I mean, you're 100% correct. If you look at the records, Rose Namajunas and Jack Hermanson won their subsequent fights. So we can leave the table right now, and you are correct on that front. However, if you dive deep into what actually happened in those fights, I mean, that third round with Rose Namajunas and Andrade, I mean, everything we said reemerged and reappeared right before our eyes. And had there been 2 extra rounds, I mean, you can make an argument for Andrade going out there and finishing, but also one can make an argument that that fight was a draw with a 10-8 round in the third. But that's not what happened. Rose got the W, so that backs up your point. And with Jack Hermanson, I mean, I don't even think Kelvin or Kelvin's coaches or anybody or even Jack's coaches were expecting a first-round heel hook. None of us expected Kelvin to get on top of Jack and then Jack to get a heel hook. So that was the element of surprise. It's not like Jack took a bunch of punches and then came back and got the sub, and we got to see him overcome adversity. So on paper, you're correct. These two came back and got the dub, so I cannot dispute that. However, I feel like the way the fights went down, I mean, it was very favorable for them. So here in Whittaker's case, look, if there's no adversity whatsoever, for sure. And I'm not saying he's a guy that can't overcome adversity, because that would be a very disingenuous thing to say about a guy like Robert Whittaker, the man with the championship stature, that he's got. I mean, Robert Whittaker is one of my all-time favorite fighters. I'm just saying that I'm not convinced he can have another, life and death, blood and guts type war again, like he had against Romero the 2 times, or take the kind of damage he took against Izzy going forward.
Totally, that's very fair. And I'm not trying to live and die on past examples, but I did want to bring that up, not just for the relevance as far as Whittaker, but another matchup we're going to talk about later down the line. We'll have another kind of mental health advocate who's had to go through his adversities, if we're using that keyword, if you will. So it's not something that I'm saying that I will or you should live and die upon, but I think it's something that's worth speaking about, especially when we're looking for angles and what is really it's been a unique environment with this Fight Island environment. But this is our 4th card. And perhaps whether it's judging trends, which I'm sure we'll talk about with some of these names, especially with the off names, or other trends that we're pontificating about here. I think they're definitely worthy and fun discussion points
about it. And obviously you and I are going to get into the stylistic matchup here in a sec, but one more the mental side of things I want to bring to the table is that obviously we talked about being a champ, losing your belt, coming back, but it's more than that. Robert Whittaker already achieved his lifelong goal. He held the belt, he defended the belt. What else is there to do for him? Whereas Darren Till, he still goes to bed every single night dreaming about that moment that Dana White's going to wrap that belt around his waist. And come Saturday night, if he can get a win over the former champion, he's one step closer to realizing that dream, Dan.
And I will say what I do like about something that backs up that attitude intangibles that we're talking about, because a lot of this is speculation, admittedly. We don't, if we had the answers, we'd be rolling around in Ferraris. We're doing well with what we can do with. But the point is, we're not fortune tellers here. That being said, there is some backup to what you're saying, Dan, because I like that Darren Till is coming in, whether it's his face, his conditioning. You look at the social medias, the interviews, he looks like he's coming in shape for a welterweight fight. Remember the welterweight fights? We'd wonder, is Darren Till going to make weight? How serious is he taking things? Yada, yada, yada. Like the way he's looking when you're trying to do that speculation on someone's, body, are they going to make the weight or not? Like, I would feel good about him making welterweight. The way he looks focused, and the kind of shape that he's coming in. If you're a Darren Till supporter, I got to imagine you like that.
Look, those 15 extra pounds of water in his body and his brain, I mean, they go so far. You look at a guy like Robert Whittaker, who he's fighting, and back when Robert Whittaker was at 170, I mean, you remember guys like Court McGee going out there and not just winning, Dan, but dropping Robert Whittaker, and then he moves up to 185 pounds. All of a sudden, he's got a chin of steel. You remember the spinning back fist by ATL's own Clint Hester. Robert Whittaker eats it no problem, keeps marching forward, goes on a massive win streak, ends up winning the belt and defending it. So what I'm curious about is Darren Till going to go through a similar run here now that he's moving up? Because I know those 15 extra pounds, he's going to bed with a smile on his face.
Yeah, that is the interesting part. They both have that similar background. And even though Till is the gorilla, and I do like him here at 185 pounds, Dan, when these two faced off, it shouldn't be a surprise. They're both listed at 6 feet, although I feel like Robert Whittaker is more toward the 5'11 range, whereas Darren Till's more the 6'1 range. They look pretty darn even. And I gotta wonder if that surprises any Till supporters here. We know how England likes to back their guys at the betting window. I would argue that action is showing here, regardless of what side you're on. I believe that's a fair statement to make. So it's going to be interesting to see if the lines continue to tighten or wide as we get closer to fight time. We're within the weigh-in window now.
Definitely, and stylistically, we got to break down this matchup. Look, Robert Whittaker. Obviously, we know both these guys for their unbelievable stand-up arsenals and skill sets. And Robert Whittaker, he leaps in with these hooks from awkward angles. And, you know, you think he's close range. You think he's about to box. And then all of a sudden, a head kick comes out of nowhere. He can throw those head kicks in the pocket, Dan. He doesn't have to be at a kicker's distance to get off on head kicks. He can throw them in the pocket, Dan Tom. So I'm telling you right now, Darren Till, you know, how Darren Till does a little bit of the James Vick, and what I mean by that is if you get a little bit too close, he'll kind of push you off and then lift that chin straight up in the air. Yeah. It might not just be a punch that comes from Whittaker. It might be a head kick after the punch that Darren Till needs to look out for. So there's a lot of tools that Robert Whittaker brings to the table. Obviously, he's got some very underrated wrestling too. He only uses it defensively these days, but you know, he placed in some tournaments down there, down under. So he's no slouch. He's put on what's it called? He's put on the leotard before. Let's just leave it at that, Dan Tom. But with Till, you know, I feel like his striking is really underrated because people only talk about, oh, he's just got a left hand. He's just got the 1-2, the left body kick. And it's like, yeah, those are his go-tos. But what's most impressive to me about Darren Till is how he disguises them, how he sets them up, how he's able to not be predictable while throwing some of the same shots throughout the entire fight. And he's one of these guys that you can see his presence when he's in there. He's a big boy, and the way he's got his arms nice and wide and his feinting game, it really makes his opponents not really know what's coming. Then they decide to commit to something. All of a sudden, a 2 hits them down the pipe. So Robert Whittaker is a very, very aggressive guy. So what I'm saying is that he needs to be a little bit careful to not be intercepted on the way in, or even after he throws his strikes, to not be countered with something on the way out.
Yeah, absolutely. And countering on the way out as something that I think is going to be a big key. You can make the argument that Robert Whittaker's kryptonite could be high-level counter strikers. You know, I know the Court McGee fight is an anomaly. Court McGee deserves credit regardless of how you score that fight. That being said, Court McGee doesn't fit the counter striking kryptonite thing that I'm sailing out here, if you will. However, I do believe there's some truth to that, even though tipping my hand, Dan, I'm leaning toward Robert Whittaker, but you're right. Anybody writing off the striking skills of Darren Till to just a left hand, it's a very dangerous thing to do. Not only is it kicks and other things he can offer, but knees and elbows, especially when he's fighting in that close range. In fact, even though I'm a big fan of Whittaker, I'm leaning toward him here. He throws excellent elbows. They were some of the best shots he landed on Yoel freaking Romero, of all people. Till's going to be someone that can elbow with Whittaker here, folks. In close distance, Whittaker is going to have to be really careful for those shots. But striking, for me, it really comes down to finding the left hand. You know, Robert Whittaker, despite how he scored the second Romero fight in particular, he's 3-0 against UFC-level lefties, and he's good at finding his left hand. Whereas if you look at, Darren Till, obviously the left hand is his money punch. He counters really well off of it. And even though it's mainly been orthodox and, check right hook, your standard check left hooks or counter right crosses, that have taxed Robert Whittaker, that left hand is still going to be very potent for Whittaker's entries and exits. Whereas, as we saw in the Jorge Masvidal fight, and we've seen in other fights like, Sam Stout, Eve Edwards, for an old school reference, whenever the left hook lands, Luke Rockhold, Michael Bisping too, whenever the left hook lands on a southpaw, it's their blind spot, man. As a southpaw, I can tell you, it's a blind spot. It deactivates the southpaws really quickly, and we saw Jorge Masvidal find that spot against Darren Till. And I can't get that out of my head here. Even when I write up Robert Whittaker, I use that fight as an example because Robert Whittaker is one of the few guys who will use those rear-legged attacks to shift it into those overhand left-hand shots that Jorge hit on Till. Obviously, Till's got to be training for it. Obviously, Till's young, improving. Colin Herron's really smart. They're going to have it on the radar. But even before that magnificent shifting, shot that Jorge landed, he actually landed multiple left hooks and landed multiple left hooks without fantastic setups like that. And they were from an orthodox stance that Robert Whittaker can throw off the counter or coming forward. Does that mean Robert Whittaker is going to win? I'm going to throw it to you here, Dan, to see who you think. But I think it's going to come down to striking. I think it's going to come down to left hands. I think those are the safe bets. However, as far as a side goes, well, I think Whittaker has a better chance of finding the left hand.
Look, it's so intriguing because people try to build up Till like he's some knockout or bust kind of guy. And I couldn't disagree more. I think he's more of a point fighter than anything. You watch his fight against Wonderboy Thompson, and the whole narrative is, oh, Wonderboy got robbed. And I don't view it like that at all. The way I view it is, firstly, if you're not on the level of Wonderboy, who is one of the, most basically coveted strikers in UFC history, right? If you're not on his level, not only is he going to beat you, Dan Tom, he's going to absolutely embarrass you in a way where you're going to go to the back of the line. You're going to have to think every single night about what went wrong. And that wasn't the case with Darren Till. I mean, the first 4 rounds of that fight was a chess match. It could have gone either way. The 5th round, Darren Till goes out there, knocks him down, and solidifies the fight. So to me, I feel like in the later rounds, that's where Darren Till might have an advantage. It's just the early going. Robert Whittaker comes out with such heat, with such an intensity that I'm worried about the things you were talking about, lifting that chin when you exit the pocket, things among those lines. Now, back to the Masvidal fight. I do also think that, Darren Till made a comment. He said, dude, during those weight cuts to 70, I lost my hearing. I was going blind. Like, basically, I wasn't even myself. My coaches were, basically pushing me into the sauna, kicking me and kicking my dead body in. You know what I mean? And who knows how the hell he made 170. So I'm not convinced that he was fully recovered the following day. That's not to take away anything from Jorge Masvidal's unbelievable knockout or Tyron Woodley's great performance or anything like that. Not at all. All I am saying, Dan Tom, is that at 185, I expect his reactions to be a little quicker. I expect him to take punches a little better, things among those lines. Now, back to this matchup. The first 2 rounds is where Darren Till needs to be the most careful, in my opinion, because Robert Whittaker in those first 2 rounds is hell on wheels, and not a lot of guys can get past it. However, normally I say Till fights with his hands down, but Whittaker actually fights with his hands even lower than Till. So the 3rd, 4th, and 5th, that's where Whittaker needs to be super careful, because one little sloppy mistake on a guy like Till, and you might hit the deck. So I'm also leaning with Whittaker, but I kind of need to see him go out here and defeat Till first. I don't like the outside talk I've been hearing. I don't like from Robert Whittaker's mouth. He said that, he lost his motivation. He was feeling burnt out. And I completely understand. Like, you accomplished everything there is to do in this sport. Like, what else is there to do for you? Like, in this sport, Robert, you're not going to go up to 205 and beat John Jones. You're not going to go back to 170. And you're sure as hell not going to beat Israel Adesanya. So I don't really know where Robert Whittaker goes from here. Now, he can get this big win, be back up there in title contention. Then you got to fight the guys like Jared Cannonier and Paulo Borrachinha. So I can see it. But on Till's side, again, I feel like he's hungrier than Robert Whittaker. So sometimes it's not the skill of the man. Sometimes it's the will of the man. And again, when I say quotes like that sound good, I'm not implying that Whittaker doesn't have the will. And I'm not implying that Till doesn't have the skill. Not at all. What I'm saying is that right now, Till is probably the hungrier guy. So at the betting window, man, it's a tough one. I do lean Whittaker because I think he's the better fighter, but I'm not sure, man. I'm not willing to put my money on him. You know, when I bet on him, it was plus 205 against Jacare, you know, stuff like that. Like, I love betting him at nice dog odds, or even against Rafael Natal, where I don't care what the juice is. I know we're gonna go out there and win that fight easily, or even at dog odds against Uriah Hall. But in this fight, coming off the title loss, everything you said, you have to lay some chalk on him. I'm just gonna pass. So we'll see what happens on Saturday night. I cannot wait, Dan Tom.
Yeah, full disclosure, I haven't pulled the trigger, and I don't know if I will for the same reasons, even though I started this breakdown off saying be careful on overinflating those narratives. Dan, I'd be lying to you and our audience if I said that those things aren't in the back of my head too, for whatever that's worth. And great trip down memory lane, because people who have been following us know that Robert Whittaker has done us both well in that middleweight run.
Co-main event in the evening, you got the trilogy between Mauricio Shogun Rua and Antonio Rogerio Nogueira. And it's funny because when you talk about, you know, both these guys, this might be their retirement fight. And a lot of people like to say, you know, Shogun's kind of getting up there in age. And, you know, while that's true, I didn't realize that Nogueira was 44, Dan Tom. No one told me he was 44.
Yeah, the age is finally starting to match the face of the Nogueira brothers. You know, it took a while, but we're finally there, Dan. No disrespect intended when I say that. Of course, everybody knows I'm a big Nogueira fan, especially Little Nog, because he's got the southpaw boxing. Not that his brother was a slouch in that department, but you know what I'm saying, Dan. I'm a big Little Nog fan, but boy, does the years catch up on you, and you go to refresh, you know, Little Nog's annual or semi-annual appearances at some points of his more relevant career, you could say. And I always love me some Little Nog, but I don't know how excited I am to see him come back after what I've been seeing for the last half a decade. Am I crazy there, Dan?
Not at all, man. I mean, look, we've seen these guys fight twice before, and both fights were super close. So the fight back in Pride, the fight at UFC 190, the same night that Ronda Rousey defeated Betch Correia. So, I mean, both times were close fights. And interestingly enough, the last time they fought at UFC 190, Lil Nog actually went out there and made Mauricio Shogun do the chicken dance. He hit it with some hard stuff. And Rua actually had to resort to the takedowns to go out there and win that fight. So I'm very curious what's going to happen this time. Is it going to be a back and forth fight until the bitter end? Is one man going to knock the other guy out early? Because look, Dan, we know with rematches, historically speaking, the guy that won the first time usually wins the second time. But trilogies is a whole nother thing. And don't even make me bring up that Chuck versus Tito example either.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, exactly. Sometimes the biggest enemy is father time, because not just to the individual fighter, but the matchup itself, right? That Chuck versus Tito was a kind of a perfect example of that. Father time will change, not the style. As far as the style goes, I think we've got solid sample sizes in the sense of they're widespread. We've got 2005, 2006, or whenever their first fight happened over there in Pride. And then you've got UFC 190, 2015, about 5 years ago. They're still in they're in their elder statesman period at this point of their career. And Dan, both fights went the exact same. You've got Little Nog tagging him early with his southpaw checks and counter crosses, something southpaw should never leave home without. But Shogun Rua, as he's shown, even in his dad bod, older version that we like to pick on, all due respect, of course, Shogun's a legend. I love him. But even in that version of him, you got to give him credit. He's able to stick it out and come back in a lot of these spots, you know. And he did just that using his really vintage grounded and pounding. You really go back and look at Shogun back in Pride to even recently. He's always kind of had that ground attack. So that doesn't surprise me so much. I'm going to pick, as Al Pacino would say, hoo-ah, here to win. But here's the difference that I see going down in the third match. I do think there's a finish, although I think from a betting perspective, you know, maybe I want to say dog or pass, but I'm actually going to go with Shogun. I think he gets the finish because Shogun's chin has already been questionable since like 2011. You know what I'm saying? As far as that war status, he's already lost his flexibility from his stumps and his knees. He's already been through his knee surgeries past 2011 by that point. He's learned how to fight in this older part, whereas Nogueira hasn't adjusted as a fighter. And as far as his structure, as well as it's holding up, feels like there's termites up in there, Dan. It feels like just one good hit and the structure is ready to fall. So even though I'm of those who am not surprised at all for Shogun to be wrestling all these years, I think he could actually get it done by knockout here.
I mean, honestly, I could see either guy getting it done by knockout. I mean, when you talk about one of the greatest knockout artists in the history of the sport, you talk about Mauricio Shogun Rua. I mean, 26 wins, 21 of them are by knockout, Dan Tom. So, I mean, it goes without saying that's definitely a path to victory. And for Lil Nog, I mean, he's got that path to victory too, man. So it's going to be very exciting. And I feel like we got to honor these guys because you never know when the last time you see them fight is going to be, man. And I did hear that this was Lil Nog's retirement fight, but you know, maybe if he goes out there and wins, maybe this is Shogun's retirement fight too. But when you look at these resumes, I mean, you're talking about a guy in Shogun wins over Machida, Chuck Liddell, Forrest Griffin, Rampage, Overeem. I mean, we can go on. When you talk about Lil Nog, you talk about wins over Dan Henderson, Overeem, Tito, Rashad. I mean, dude, like these guys are such legends, and we really got to tip our cap to guys like these, you know, true pioneers of the sport that are fighting. I believe this is their third decade of fighting, Dan Tom, because I know you remember that video that came out of Mauricio Shogun when he was like 15 years old, sparring at like some house party, you know, and everyone's circling around, and it was just brutal. And the fact that he made it through that generation, he goes to Pride, to the UFC, the whole bit, and it is truly an amazing thing to see, you know, these guys in the co-main event. And, you know, you never know when the last time you're going to see him is. So you got to tip our cap to these legends.
Well said, man. Yeah, I love both guys. And even though my pick is Shogun, my heart's with Little Nog. I've always been a big Little Nog fan. The swinging southpaw, baby.
Yeah, so look, they got Mauricio Shogun Rua minus 185. The comeback on Lil Nog is plus 160. So it's literally exactly the same place that it was lined when they fought at UFC 190. And Shogun, you know, he won the unanimous decision, 29-28 on all three cards. And yeah, I do pick Rua here, but at the betting window, I'd pass because, I mean, is it going to surprise you if Lil Nog wins? It's not going to, sure as hell ain't going to surprise me. Look, let me tell you something, Dan Tom. If you would have told me 5 years ago that Mauricio Shogun's out here going to a draw with Paul Craig, I would have said you're out of your damn mind, Dan. And that's kind of what is going on these days. So it's one of those situations. If you would have told me Lil Nog is losing to guys like Ryan Spann, I'd been like, yeah, okay. But that's what's going on. So nothing's going to surprise me. But yeah, as a pure pick, I'll go with Mauricio Shogun.
Shogun also 4-3 against career UFC level southpaws for you stats nuts.
All right, it's good to know, Dan Tom. Appreciate it. So the featured bout in the heavyweight division, we got actually the former light heavyweight #1 contender, Alexander Gustafsson, coming up to heavyweight to take on the former champ. And not just the former champ, Dan Tom, the guy that dethroned Cain Velasquez, the guy that ended Fedor's unbelievable run. I mean, Fabricio Werdum, when you talk about a Hall of Famer, you talk about Fabricio Vacavallo Werdum. But Alexander Gustafsson, he's coming out of retirement. I mean, look, he said his words after the Anthony Smith fight was, I just don't have it anymore. And that's one thing I've never, ever heard Fabricio Vacavallo Werdum say. But on the flip side, Fabricio was heavily criticized for his performance against Alexei Olenek. A lot of people thought, hey, maybe this is the end for Fabricio Werdum. Now, it could be. I did hear an interview with him, and he said that, you know, that Olenek fight was, you know, around the time that the pandemic was first starting and people were kind of scared to go to the gym. So, you know, he didn't get any sparring in that entire camp, no strength and conditioning, nothing. He kind of just showed up and was hoping for the best and still got to a split decision. But I know it looks bad because he was a huge favorite in that spot. But here he says that, you know, after that, the way that last one went down, I knew I had to turn things around. He sparred this entire camp. He did his strength and conditioning. He had people in there with him, helping him out. So win, lose, or draw, Dan Tom, I'm expecting a better showing by Fabricio Vacavallo Werdum Saturday night.
I like that you mentioned that. I also agree. I also went to see those interviews. And you're right, the timeline does check out. I don't want to say that means he's going to win. That means he's going to show up in great vintage shape. You know, remember Verdum when he's got the tight shorts, looking physique early on in his career? Or as I used to call him Verboom. You know, that story. But, you know, like I'm not saying that, but I do agree that he should be able to come in much better shape. I went to his social media, but Verdum's a tough guy. And again, hey man, you know, this is coming from a guy that's got like the least attractive physique in the world. But what I want to set up here is that Verdum could be one of those guys where he looks like he's in shape from the face. Like, oh man, this guy looks like he's in really good shape. And then you see him show up to the weigh-ins and you're like, why did I bet on this guy? Where was he hiding that? Like he's got one of those weird bodies from a weird bodied guy. But yeah, like, so it's always difficult to know when to trust him. But I'll tell you what, Dan, I looked at the line on this fight, which I'll let you spit to our audience here, and I immediately wanted to target it. You know, I'm a big Verdum fan. He did really well for me against, you know, breaking hype trains like Travis Brown, or no disrespect to him, or Cain Velasquez, two types of profiles that we like to kind of fade, no disrespect, but for different reasons. Verdum was a great tool when it came to that. I appreciate that. Was looking to play him here, but let's just say I almost want to stay the hell away from this fight after kind of peeling back the onion. Am I crazy, Dan? What was your feeling on this one?
I mean, you're not crazy. I mean, after you see Doom's last fight, I understand. But the thing is, as a betting man, when I see Gustafsson coming out of retirement, going up a weight class, and he's minus 350, and you know, Doom's almost plus 300, that does not sit right with me at all. And sometimes it's not even about who you think's going to win; it's about where the value is. And when I look at their last few fights, and I see Gustafsson's last two fights against John Jones and Anthony Lionheart Smith, and firstly, both those fights ended on the ground. And to take it a step further, the fight hit the mat one time and it was over shortly after. So I know for a fact where Doom takes his back, where Doom gets that neck, and it's gonna be game, set, and match. You know, sayonara, bon voyage. You know what I mean, Dan Tom? But the thing here is that, you know, people can say, oh, but he just fought John Jones. Like, what's the big deal? It's the GOAT. It's like, yeah, okay. But he also fought John Jones in his prime, and a lot of people thought he arguably won. So if that's not a sign of a decline, I don't know what is. They rematched, and you say, oh, everyone knows I beat him the first time. Then you go out there the second time. And I mean, the first two rounds, Gustafsson looked horrendous. The third round, he got finished as soon as they hit the mat against Lionheart Smith. And everyone likes to act like, oh, Gustafsson was going out there and outpointing Lionheart Smith. And then, oh, he just got taken down, and, you know, the comeback kid just beat him. And it's like, that's not what happened. Lionheart Smith was out there winning rounds against Gustafsson, which, Dan Tom, Lionheart Smith is not a round winner. Lionheart Smith is a comeback fighter. So the first round, Lionheart goes out there and wins the first round. I was like, damn, like, Gustafsson's not looking himself. And then it hits the mat one time. The fight's over shortly after. Now let's talk about Doom for a sec, because yeah, he didn't look that good, but you know what he's done his last few fights, Dan? He's landed takedowns against Volkov. Had that been a 3-round fight, there's an argument where Doom won, because he took him down the first, the second, and the third. Fourth round, you know, kind of fell off a cliff. It is what it is. But I'm saying he got him down. The Olenek fight, he got him down twice. So I think he can take down Gustafsson one time and finish the fight right then and there. So I could be way off. Maybe he comes out here, gets knocked out. Maybe he looks old like he did the last time. But I don't trust Gustafsson to set him this big of a favorite. Like, I don't think Gustafsson's looked good in almost half a decade, Dan Tom. So I don't see it, man. And I'm actually going with Doom for the upset. I think that on the feet, he can hang on the feet. I mean, Doom's got some good Muay Thai too. Like, people forget about his Muay Thai, man. The guy's a Master Cordero black belt. He can stand too. But obviously, it'll be advantageous. Get this to the mat. Use that, world championship level jiu-jitsu and choke this guy out. Because I really believe you put Gustafsson in one bad spot, and I think the fight will be over shortly after, Dan.
Yeah, again, this is why it's great. We get the betting perspective on here in full force with you, Dan. And from the betting perspective, I completely agree. In fact, you're talking me in to maybe making my degenerate sprinkle a little heavier here now that we're discussing it, right, and fleshing it out. However, from the analyst perspective, here's kind of how I see it. It's fight IQ. It's fight IQ versus implosion. Gustafsson's got the better fight IQ, but we've seen it even in fights he's winning. Even in rounds he's winning, and granted, he wasn't winning some rounds in some fights where he should have, like you mentioned. But regardless, we've seen the temperature turn as soon as he gets his back taken, as soon as he can get settled on the ground, right? And that is uncomfortable. So for that alone, plus that big number, plus the fact that not just the line is kind of disrespecting Verdum, but even pundits and talk from Twitter to professionals, right? I'm seeing a lot of people just completely pump up Gustafsson a little too much, and I like Gustafsson, and be almost a little too disrespectful for Verdum. So a Verdum stand, a contrarian, and someone looking for those angles, it checks all those boxes for me. So I'm not arguing that, Dan. It's just, here's what worried me, and I think this is why my official pick on the Junkie staff picks, I may have submitted Gustafsson, is because if you look at it, ever since he won the title, Verdum, to Cain Velasquez by submission, against the gas Cain, who ran into a guillotine, and I cashed on that, and I'm all about that. I'm not trying to take away from that. The only person he's subbed since then in over 5 years is Walt Harris, who, no offense to Walt Harris, is not a ground fighter. No offense to Walt Harris, took that fight the day of. And if you look at all the other fights, there's some weird sample sizes, but there are plenty takedowns that to be had. And remember, Fabricio Verdum's got some underrated wrestling, folks. He was the first person to break Travis Brown's 100% takedown defense record at the time. Verdum can hold his own there. He's got a really good deep single. He's got a deep half game. You guys know how much I love deep half. But whether he's getting on top with that single or he's using the deep half to get to guys' backs, he's not been able to finish these guys, man. And maybe a Marcin Tybura, it makes sense because Tybura is a grappler and a back take guy. But Volkov isn't. Volkov's gotten better, but Volkov's kryptonite has always been grapplers. And you're right. If it was a 3-round fight, he would have beat Volkov. I picked him to beat Volkov that night. But the problem was it wasn't a 3-round fight, and Verdum didn't pace himself accordingly. Or he's chasing after Stipe in the first round trying to get things back. Or he's too busy around on a guy that he already beat, like Travis Brown, or not taking advantage of opportunities to submit a guy like Overeem, who, granted, Overeem's underrated, but a guy he already submitted and beat in Overeem. He's not doing it. He's missing these marks too much for me, and I don't like that pattern. I don't like a guy as vaunted as he was, and he proved a lot of us right when he submitted Nogueira and he came through and submitted Velasquez, and I was amongst those that say, respect this man's submission game, Dan. But after proving us all right for all these years, and now he set this trend for the past 5 years of losing position and losing fights and making bad IQ choices, I guess that's what scared me off. Am I saying that he's not going to win? No. Am I saying that I disagree with you from a betting perspective? Not at all. I'll probably admittedly degenerately sprinkle on Verdum myself, but from an analyst, that's what scares me, and that's probably why I officially lean toward Gustafsson despite disagreeing with the odds.
It's just my whole thing with that is like, when we see Gus in those bad spots on the mat, he doesn't survive like a guy like Volkov, who, by the way, his last fight with Curtis Blades, it was Volkov that came out in the 4th and 5th and arguably won those rounds, which is crazy after the domination of the first 3. And that fight with Overeem, I mean, he lost the first 2 rounds. 3rd round knocks him down, and on one card got a 10-8, and then that other one against Olenik's got like 50 submissions on his record. So I feel like these are completely different level ground fighters than Gustafsson, whereas Gustafsson against Anthony Smith, who, like, in Gustafsson's prime, he's not just beating Anthony Smith, he's absolutely mopping the floor and embarrassing him. To go out there and get choked out by a guy like that, I still think that Verdum's got enough in the tank, but that's why they fight. And look, maybe I'm way off. I'm talking about a plus 300 dog. So who knows? The percentages say that I'm completely wrong, Dan Tom, but that's why they fight on Saturday night, and we'll see what happens. I could never lay that price on Alexander Gustafsson. So we're doomed for the win. We'll see what happens.
We'll see what happens. But you know what? I don't think I don't know if you're wrong or not. You're not crazy, Dan. I think these lines are wrong, though. I think that's the common ground, and it's about finding angles to take advantage of those wrong lines, right?
Yes, sir. That's all it is. And long term, be on the right side of the coin. So, Dan, in the strawweight division, I'm very intrigued by this bout between Marina Rodriguez and the former champion Carla Esparza. And let's just get the odds out the way, because they got Marina Rodriguez minus 175 with a plus 155 comeback on the former champ Esparza. And this is the most cut and dry fight on the entire card. I mean, we know Marina wants to keep it standing, and we know Carla wants to get it to the mat, but it's not that simple, Dan Tom, because on the feet, this is such a mismatch to a point where if Carla does not get on top of her early, I don't just think that she's going to get outpointed. I think she's going to get beat up. I think she's going to get potentially TKO'd. And the thing is, when you talk about taking her down, and you can tell me about how, Cynthia Calvillo took her down, or how Randa Marcos took her down. And, Randa Marcos also took down Esparza. But regardless of that, I feel like Carla Esparza is a lot shorter than those ladies. She's 5'1". For her to close the distance on Marina Rodriguez, it's going to have to be like some Joseph Benavidez type stuff where she charges in head first. You charge in head first against Marina Rodriguez, there's going to be a knee up the middle. There's going to be an uppercut. There's going to be an elbow waiting to greet you. And if she does get on top of Marina, I feel like Marina proved that she can get back up. I mean, in that fight with Cynthia Calvillo, look, What people often forget, because people only say, "Oh, you saw what happened in that third round," and they just leave it at that. They don't preface it by saying when other ladies get taken down by Cynthia Calvillo, they usually get finished right away. I mean, what happened when Baltelio got taken down by Cynthia Calvillo? I mean, 2 seconds later, she's tapping out. Whereas with Marina, look, she had to take some shots, but eventually she gets back up and then she keeps going forward. And the thing with Carla is she lands 0 damage on top anyways. So it's not like, Marina's got to worry about, oh, I'm going to get sliced up with elbows or anything like that. She might get held down for a sec, but the amount of points she's going to be landing on the feet, the amount of damage, the amount of strikes is going to be so significant that Carla better submit her. Carla better get full mount. Carla better keep her down for 15 straight minutes, or Carla is not just going to lose this fight. She's going to get embarrassed on Saturday night, Dan Tom.
It's funny. You don't got to give your hand, but when I was looking at this fight, I go, okay, I know a lot of people are going to be targeting Marina in this spot for a lot of the reasons you said. And people that know me, they're like, oh, this is a spot where Dan Tom's going to be a contrarian. He's going to go with the veteran. He's going to go with the wrestler. He's going to go with the grappler. He's going to go against the grain. He's going to go against the popular pick. And people that know me, they're not wrong if they want to characterize me like that. However, I am completely on the Marina Rodriguez train for this fight. Not that I was ever against her, by the way. I picked Cynthia Calvillo to beat her for that reason. And even though Calvillo was able to earn a draw, and I believe that was a fair scorecard, I'm not trying to argue that. I believe, she maybe at least not look crazy for that pick. But I'm glad you brought up the third round, because when I went back to watch it, even though I have no issue with the scorecard, I liked what I saw from Rodriguez, when she did get up after being taken down, the way she protected her head. She almost did something that even like the Nogueiras will do when they do their half guard dives, they'll almost bait that head and arm catch, and they'll keep their elbow pinned over to the side of their ribs, keeping a nice strong airway open between their neck and shoulder as their other arm underhooks. And they use that to either get up, which Marina Rodriguez did, or deep half, which she didn't do, which was good. That's not her game. She needs to get up and strike. And people always compare it to Joanna Jędrzejczyk, which something I called since Marina Rodriguez stepped on the scene. Just seeing her, and for a lot of reasons, the skinny, muscly, mean, demonic Muay Thai spirit. It's really easy to see those comparisons. Here's the real reason why you should be comparing and giving Marina Rodriguez credit is because she uses single leg get-ups, one of the smartest get-ups that's underutilized in MMA. All MMA fighters, no matter what your style, you should be familiar with this position, especially if you are a striker. It's one of the things that Joanna Jędrzejczyk doesn't get enough credit for in her style. And I love seeing that Marina Rodriguez does this. And again, you bring up that third round, Dan. People don't mention this. Like you said, yeah, it was a rightful 10-8. That's how I scored it. But despite taking that beating that most girls wouldn't have survived, Rodriguez actually got up from that and got right back on the horse. Didn't look slow and sluggish and was swinging to the end of the bell. That's what you want to see. She didn't get discouraged from the 10-8. Was she going to win the round back? No. Did she win it back? No. But that was a great lesson to learn without actually having to take a loss. And when I look at Carla, as far as trying to bet her or pick her as the underdog, I was immediately swayed away once I was reminded how little she counters kicks, how much she circles on the outside. And even in that last fight where I picked her and I needed her to win, and I thankfully the judges saw it that way against Michelle Waterson. Even though I was not one, Dan, to underestimate Michelle Waterson's wrestling, I still believe Carla Esparza should have been able to win that fight easier than she did. And even when she was forced to pressure in that third round, when she could have been down 2-0, depending on how you looked at it, even when she was forced to pressure and was successful, what did she do? Did she go for the takedown? No, she backed off. And Carla got really lucky she won that fight. So for those reasons, I actually like Marina Rodriguez in this spot. I don't blame anybody taking the shot on her. Full disclosure, I haven't yet. It's not saying that I won't. But for people thinking that I'm going to be contrarian, Dan, and play the grappler and veteran here, no, man. I go by the stylistic matchups, and I like what I see from Rodriguez.
Yeah, and I like the fact that, even though she had those 2 draws, what she did on the feet was so well respected that, her being held down didn't give her a loss. And Randa Marcos and Cynthia Calvillo land way more damage than Carla Esparza. And the only time Carla got a takedown that last fight against Waterson was off a lazy kick that got caught. So, hey, if she does that here, props to her. But I think Marina's going to know to, pull that kick back quick and use more hands, more elbows, more knees. And we'll have to see what goes down Saturday night.
I agree, man.
Now, next up in the light heavyweight division, we got a matchup between two finishers because Gadzi Himurat Antigulov is taking on Paul the Bear Jew Craig. And Dan, Tom, it's really interesting because you don't often see a minus next to Paul Craig's name. You know, he's built a reputation for being that guy that gets the comeback finishes. That third round with Paul Craig, you better look out. I mean, just ask Kennedy and Zechuku. Just ask Magomed and Khalif. That third round with Paul Craig, he's very, very dangerous. But here with Antigulov, he's a guy that in his 20 wins, 17 of them are first round finishes, Dan Tom. So, man, that first round, Paul Craig's got to watch out because Antigulov is hell on wheels. But in that third round, if Antigulov's getting a little bit gassed out, it might be a Triangle City. So, how you see this one going down?
It's interesting because you're right. You don't normally see a minus number next to Paul Craig's name, but you're also not crazy, albeit right, man, because Paul Craig actually opened as the underdog, but money has come in on Craig because apparently people are not pro Gulov. They are in fact anti Gulov, so they're betting against the guy. But no, it's funny. It's one of those things where I know you've said this too, Dan. So perhaps I'm preaching to the choir. So maybe to our audience, but the OV, right? The OV is a special thing, and a lot of people get excited by the OV, rightfully so, but you can also be misled by the OV. Just because you're OV doesn't mean you're Russian, or just because you're Russian like Antigulov doesn't mean you're good, even if you have a freestyle master of sports wrestling, because that's another thing, right? We assume all the Dagestani guys can wrestle, but some of them are actually Wushu Sanda guys, which does have grappling, but the point is they're more kickboxers, right? So it gets really tricky. Antigulov, let's just say he doesn't rank high on the totem pole of the Russian talent. He is a real do or die guy. Usually, if you got the master of sports and freestyle wrestling, plus you got all those first round finishes, like you said, Dan, 17 out of 20. Like, I'm excited. I'm in. Oh, you were fighting in a really deceptively tough region, in a deceptively tough organization like ACB, now ACA. Oh man, I'm in. He's checking all these boxes, Dan. But when we actually watch how he fights and who he fights against, I do not like what I see. He is a real do or die guy who I usually tend to bet against from a better. And as an analyst, I also tend to pick against. So in this case, if a guy where his safety valve is to get a guy on the ground like Paul Craig, who is one of the few guys who can actually work from guard in any division, not only work from guard in any division, but pull out last minute submissions, not once, but twice. Who knows, Dan? Possibly thrice, because Antigulov does not make it to that third round that often. Plus, Paul Craig showing improvements in his own wrestling and in his own striking. Say what you will about that Shogun fight, but I do think it, at the very least, boosted Paul Craig's confidence. Falsely or not, we can argue that. I don't think it's going to hurt him any kind of confidence going into this fight. If I'm not already tipping my hand, but I agree with the public money here.
Yeah, no, I mean, from the Paul Craig side, you gotta praise him for the Shogun fight. It's the Shogun side that you're kind of like, dude, like you would have killed this guy in your prime. You know what I mean?
Totally. Yes.
But from the Paul Craig side, hey, you went to a draw with a legend. Like, hell yeah, man. Good job, buddy. You even won the first round. You got yourself a draw. Congrats. But here with Antigulov, the thing that's interesting about this fight is that I feel like Antigulov's going to come out here, probably take down Paul Craig right away, and he might have some success early, maybe even get that first round finish that he's looking for. The thing is, Dan, if he doesn't get that first round finish, I can say confidently that, and watch me be 100% wrong, but I can say confidently that he's probably not winning a decision here. He's probably not getting a late second or third round finish. I feel like it's first round or bust for Antigulov, and he could totally do it because Paul Craig isn't the most defensively sound. But to credit your point, and you're 100% correct when you say that it's not just Paul Craig coming out there and tapping these guys off his back with triangles. What about that double leg he hit on Ankaleev? What about these blast doubles, that one he hit on Jimmy Cruz? So Paul Craig's actually been improving, which you got to give him a lot of credit for. And he's even patching up the holes in his stand-up game too. So I think the early going is going to favor Antigulov. But as the fight goes on, and look, either guy could get a first-round finish. But if this fight hits deep waters, I'm going with the slight favorite Paul Craig here.
I'm with you on that. And there's a lot of angles you can play here. You already see where me and Dan are at. But if you want to see my exact angle, let's just say I wouldn't be surprised to see Paul Craig end up on my on this week's betting sheet over at linemovement.com.
Yeah, look, it's interesting. And not to discourage you or anything like that. And actually the quite opposite. Everybody go read his read his article at linemovement.com or follow us at line_movement. Comment below. Let us know what the deal is. But here's what I want to say. Paul Craig's a guy that I'd like to bet on at, and firstly, I've never bet him before in my life, but if I were to bet on Paul Craig, I would like to bet him at dog odds and or by submission or this or that, even though I don't bet props. So it'd be at dog odds. But here you got to lay a little bit of chalk on him. So all I'm saying is that for you to lay chalk on Paul Craig, you better be pretty damn confident that he comes out here and wins because he's known for being a comeback kid.
I agree on that. Let's just say, without tipping my hand further, I'll be looking at a plus money angle on this matchup.
So Dan Tom, in the welterweight division, we got a matchup between Alex Cowboy Oliveira, and he's welcoming back Peter Sobotta to the octagon. And man, such an intriguing fight for so many reasons. Like I would go ahead and say that Alex Oliveira is the better fighter. He's the more physical guy. Man, Alex Oliveira hits like a truck, and obviously he's a personality that we like outside the cage too for a lot of reasons. I'm sure you'll mention some of them. But I mean, look, Alex Oliveira is a staple of the welterweight division. How can you not love Alex Cowboy? It's just here with Peter Sobotta. It's one of these situations where Alex has got to watch out on the mat because Alex, you know, he beats these guys up in the clinch. He lands these nasty knees, even gets takedowns of his own. He's knocked people out standing, but sometimes he can beat someone up so bad that he gets carried away. He can make one simple mistake on the mat and the fight might be over shortly after. And here with a Dean Lister black belt and Peter Sobotta, if I'm thinking correctly and Peter Sobotta is, meeting up with his coaches, watching the film on Alex Cowboy, I highly doubt that they're like, you know what, our best path to victory is to stand and bang with Alex Cowboy. Our best path to victory is to, try to push him up against the fence and get into a clinch battle. I highly doubt that. They're probably saying, look, he's going to come out hard. He's going to come out wild. He's probably going to hit you with some hard stuff. But if we can level change, duck under, get this to the mat and take his back, there's a good chance we come out here and choke this guy out, Dan.
That's exactly the layout, and you got to imagine he's doing that, especially as a head coach over there at Planet Eater. You got to be careful with these guys. And Dan, you can tell me your take. These annual show up guys. I don't want to say Leonardo Santos is one of them because Leonardo Santos is probably at the very end of that spectrum. He shows up every couple years, but those guys, they only show up on the European cards or whatever, right? They make those yearly appearances. They're easy to write off. Oh, Peter Sobotta's been around. Remember when he fought and lost during Amir Sadala and Wilkes and all those guys, over a decade ago? But then you look at it, the dude only just turned 33 this year. He's technically still within his prime. And since he wasn't fighting at a rigorous, yet be it still consistent schedule, you could also argue that Sobotta doesn't have the miles on him. So these guys are really nightmares to me to read, but it's an opportunity if you like that, as far as the submission goes. Sobotta did me well in certain spots before, but he's not a guy that I'd be, feel great about betting, when you're getting minus 150 against a guy like Ben Saunders with plus money on the inside the distance line, that's a different story. However, this one scares me, but it scares me on the other side too, because I'll be honest, put my cards on the table. I'm picking Oliveira to win here, but I'm not that confident in it because, again, against the cage, we know how good his cage and clinch game is, but he can be level changed and taken down. Peter Sobotta does have level changing takedowns that are pretty competent, actually. So that kind of scares me here. But Oliveira also, you could argue, outside of his Gunnar Nelson fight, has been showing ground improvements in this pandemic era. If you go to his social media, his jiu-jitsu coach has been the main coach he has been training with. Are those good signs? I'm not sure, but here's one interesting stat, though. He is facing a southpaw, right? Oliveira's stats against southpaws? Minus that weird draw against Tim Means, who he later fought and finished. I'm a big Tim Means fan, and that fight, if you look at Tim Means' trajectory, it becomes less and less of a weird result, if you could say. Regardless, Tim Means sample size included, Alex Oliveira is 3-0-1 against UFC level southpaws. And he's gotten some of his most impressive finishes where he's literally deading guys like Petter Soli or Ryan LaFleur when he's gotten these open stance matchups. Competent kickboxers with a level changing threat in LaFleur. That'll be relevant to his level-changing threat matchup here, or better kickboxers like flashy guys like Pedersoli, or technical guys who I stand for like Tim Means. Alex Oliveira has passed all those tests and got some of his best finishes. So I'm going to pick him here, but I'm not going to be uber confident that he, I'm not going to be uber confident tell you to go to the betting window. However, if he does win, I wouldn't be surprised, for it to be in some kind of knockout fashion.
Yeah, look, I completely understand favoring Cowboy Oliveira here. I feel like he's the better fighter, the more physical guy, and just someone more reliable across the board. It's just, I got that one major issue, and that's on the mat, because I truly believe that even if Peter Sabata is getting beat up, that double leg, that entry is always there. Get that back, and you can bail yourself out of any situation, because like Gunnar Nelson was taking a beating against Cowboy Oliveira, and all you need is that one little slip up. Alex gets a little bit too excited, a little bit too overeager. Oh, I got this guy on death's doorstep. Let's go ahead and unload the clip. And then all of a sudden the guy's on your back choking you out. So I feel like this is actually a dog or pass situation, just because it's like with Alex Oliveira, if I'm laying -175 chalk on him the whole time the fight's going on, I'm going to be like, Alex, please calm down. Alex, no. Alex, wait. Alex, please. Alex, wait. Alex, you know what I mean? So it's like one of those situations where like he's gonna whoop on Peter Sabata until it hits the mat, and then when it hits the mat, there might not be another, there might not be a second try, there might not be another attempt to get off on some damage. I think it might be over shortly after. So I do think this is a dog or pass situation. I understand the pick on Cowboy, and I think he should be favored for the reasons I mentioned, but for me personally, and I could be way off, I'm going to go with Peter Sabata to opportunistically finish Alex Cowboy somewhere along the way, specifically with a submission.
Yeah, speaking of Alex, no, Alex, stop. Like there's that clip I posted at Dan Tom MMA on Twitter of Alex Davis's manager, trying to intervene with Cowboy and an official. Let's just say Cowboy has just as much a chance of attacking the officials in the octagon for different reasons than his opponent. You don't know what that guy is going to do. And I guess that's all I'll add to that.
Yeah, I mean, we don't want to get him his 11th kid quite yet. We still got to pay for 10. So let's slow it down, my boy Alex. Shout out to Alex Cowboy Oliveira. Love that guy. Now, Dan Tom, we got to talk about this kid, Khamzat Chimaev, because he's taking on Rice McKee, who's making his UFC debut. And Khamzat Chimaev goes out there against John Phillips in his debut. And when I say he walked through him, I mean, he destroyed him in a way where people are legit calling this kid a future world champion. Now, I'm not one of those people, not because I don't think the kid has the potential, or not because, I want to, downplay everyone's trajectory or anything even remotely close to that. It's just that I need to see it firsthand. You know what I mean? Because it's like when you beat a guy in John Phillips, who I love watching John Phillips. He can bang with anyone, and you stand and bang with John Phillips, you're in big trouble. It's just that I've seen much lesser people dominate John Phillips like that. I've seen Charles Byrd go out there and look like a future world champ against John Phillips before. So to me, dominating John Phillips, great job. You looked amazing, kid. And I can't wait to see your next fight. But that's not a performance that's not a fight where I'm saying future world champion. Now, if he goes out there, looks like that against a contender, then Dan Tom, then we're having a different discussion. I mean, he goes out there against Brad Tavares and does that kind of thing. Okay, then I'm like, hey, maybe y'all are onto something. But he needs to do a little bit more than destroy John Phillips for me to anoint him a future world champion, Dan Tom.
Those are all fair statements. And even though I'll be the first to say I'm usually, and that's not unfair or MMA math by definition, so I don't want to mischaracterize what you're saying. But even though I'm not somebody to lean heavily on that, we had that conversation on last week's show about Arman Tsarukyan when we were talking about his, and you were on the same side of me on that fight as well, Dan. But what were we talking about? What we're talking about is pre-UFC, right? About how, like, looking at these guys and being able to say, well, why are you so high on them if they're not facing, tough guys? Sometimes it's a double-edged sword, and it's a gamble. But if you really have a feel for whether it's a striking technique or certain grappling techniques you like, and you're seeing these guys do it at that level, sometimes you can get a beat on it and kind of not disregard, but look past, if that makes sense, their strength of competition to their actual strengths. And Chimaev was one of those guys. I was saying about that as well coming in, and he he arguably showed that. However, to your point, Dan, let me pose this question to strengthen your point, because I don't disagree with your point you're making. If Chimaev, he has the exact same performance, right, that he had a couple weeks ago. Let's say he has the exact same performance against John Phillips. Now, let's pretend he doesn't have the Khabib beard, and in his post-fight interview doesn't go, "I'm here to smash." Do we still see a minus 1,200 line?
That's a great question. And it's like, if he wasn't fighting Rice McKee, then probably not. But the thing is, this is such a stylistically favorable matchup. And not to keep talking, because I know you got a point to make here, but it's like, Rice McKee, do you remember when Luis Pena got his first ever UFC win against this kid, Richie Smolin, and he choked him out in the first round?
Yeah.
So I max bet Luis Pena in that spot. And the reason why I max bet Luis Pena in that spot is because I watched a fight between Richie Smolin and Rice McKee that went to a draw. And I was like, oh, this guy's coming to the UFC. Yeah. Jonah Hill, cut. You know what I mean?
Right,
I was like, yeah, that ain't going to pan out. So now, Richie Smolin went in there, got finished in the first round. Now it's Rice McKee's turn to come in there and get finished in the first round. And look, I feel like, because if Rice McKee watches this, I got respect for the kid. He went out there and he knocked out Jay Herbert in the first round. So after the Richie Smolin draw, he's been putting in work. He's been doing his thing. It's just that this is a bit of a tall order. Like, he's not going to stuff these takedowns. And on the feet, actually, Chimaev's no slouch at all either. He's launched some people. It's just that he gravitates towards that heavy grappling style. So yeah, I think in this spot he should be a huge favorite. It's just, if they line him like this against, I don't want to disrespect Rice McKee and say real guys, but you know what I'm trying to say. If they do that against top 25 guys, well, then we're gonna have a different discussion, Dan.
I agree with that point. And yeah, I like that you brought up that fight against Jai, which we'll talk about in a second, I guess. And unless he comes up with another perfectly placed shot like that fight, which, let's just say, he deserves absolute credit for, Rice McKee, but let's just say I'm not putting like a huge amount of credit or a ton of faith into that when I went back and watched the rest of McKee's fights. But yeah, the Richie Smolin name, man. Again, not that I'm a big fan of this type of MMA math, but the guy was having trouble getting wins against regional 145ers at lightweight. Now he's facing a welterweight who's fresh, warmed up, and fresh off of beaten up middleweights, and trains with a former light heavyweight title challenger, now heavyweight. I mean, you want to talk about the side and just forget about the skill set that's ultimately going to decide the fight, which is top-notch wrestling. So, I mean, you want to talk about size differences and math differences there on paper. There's a lot going against McKee that in that sense justifies an inflated line, so to speak, but I won't be touching it. I'll be looking to play it, and all respect to Rice McKee. I hope he gets a good spot at at welterweight. I think he's good. I think he can do well there. He's a big guy. It's not that he shouldn't be fighting there. I just hope that regardless of how this fight goes, we get a more favorable matchup for him next.
And I'll just say this: if Rice McKee is to come out here and get this upset, it'll be the biggest upset of 2020, bigger than the Macy Barber fight against Roxanne Modafferi. And I know there was another big upset that happened recently, but this would be, bar none, the biggest upset of 2020. And if this line keeps climbing, Dan, it could be the biggest upset in UFC history. So it's one of these situations where, Hamzat's minus 1250. You don't often see a minus 1250 in the UFC, but that's what this kid's doing. So, and I mean, I look at some other books and I see 1429. So, you might see minus 1500, you might see minus 2000. So let's definitely keep our eyes peeled to the line and then see how he performs as well.
Absolutely. I agree with that 100%.
So next up in the lightweight division, we got a showdown between Francisco Masuranduba Trinaldo and Jai, the Black Country Banger Herbert. That's his nickname, Dan Tom. And I mean, the nickname is fitting because this dude comes to bang. And when we talk about a piston right hand, when we talk about an accurate fight-ending shot, you got to talk about Jay Herbert's right hand. But Trinaldo's no slouch either. He can crack with that overhand left too.
Yeah, man, I like going back and watching Herbert, and even though I still don't disagree with the line movement, which we can talk about here as this fight is getting tighter as we get closer to fight time, I could see why a lot of people like Herbert, and I'm definitely game to watch him going forward. You know, he was over there in the Cage Warriors English scene, may have fought in Bama as well, I believe. But, you know, he's got a lot of athleticism, some smooth striking, crisp. He's got a really good frame for 155, really long. Doesn't appear to be a slouch in the scrambling department either. Comes from a jiu-jitsu school, a well-respected one in England, Renegade Jiu-Jitsu. I believe he's a blue belt. But he's going against a brown belt in Masaran Nuba Trinaldo, who has a ton of kickboxing experience, some of the most kickboxing experience on the card. Granted, he's 100 years old to some people, so I guess saying that he has the most experience shouldn't surprise anybody. But for a guy that gets old, man, I know I'm diving right into the techniques here. Obviously, I'm passionate about this one. I'm still not seeing it. I mean, he's still taking shots. He's still giving shots. He's still scaring guys away. His pace, whether it's the strikes that he's throwing or landing, is only going upwards. He's doing things like you mentioned another southpaw and a great point about Darren Tiill, Dan, about he doesn't get enough points for his round winning and knowing how to win rounds. And I don't think Trinaldo gets enough points too. He gets classified as that knockout or bust, which his counters are going to be super live. But if you look at it, he's one of those dudes that can go out and win rounds with like 5 or 7 significant strikes. He knows how to do that. You know, he'll score the knockdown. He'll get the big takedown. He'll lose some positions. He'll lose some time, control time here or there, but he'll be the one landing the more emphatic things, which in judges' trends, how it's supposed to be, we should be rewarding damage. We're seeing judges, knock on wood, doing that a little more. I don't know. Am I crazy here, Dan? I'm trying to see why this line is so close. Talk some sense into me, man.
When you talk about line movement, go to linemovement.com, follow us at line_movement. Let us know your thoughts down below. But when you talk about this line movement, man, I mean, look, Francisco Masuranduba Trinaldo, it's a situation where the guy is such a winner. And like you were saying, he's not just a knockout threat. He can go out there and win decisions too. But when you see all the highlight reel knockouts that this kid Jay Herbert's been producing, and you also realize that, hey, he's in his 30s, so he's in his prime now. He doesn't need any more seasoning on the regional scene. Like, you're going to fight Trinaldo in your UFC debut. And if Trinaldo tries to stand and bang with a guy like Jay Herbert, this could be a chance where we could actually see Trinaldo's age come to light, because these other guys that have been going out there fighting him, like Alex Hernandez, like Makdessi, like Vic, like Dunham, they've all kind of been running away from Trinaldo, right? Whereas Jay Herbert's not going to run at all. He's going to get right in Trinaldo's face, and that's going to make it a real fight. Now, the place where I think Trinaldo has the biggest edge, I mean, obviously experience and all that stuff, but the place specifically in this fight where I think he's got the biggest edge is on the mat, because on the mat, that knockdown threat by Jay Herbert is completely eliminated. So you're not going to have to worry about this guy adding to his amazing highlight reel. I mean, that right hand, we can keep talking about it. It's serious, man. But Trinaldo can mix in some takedowns. We've seen in Jay Herbert's regional footage that much lesser competition than Francisco Trinaldo was not just taking him down, Dan Tom, but was passing, was getting full mount. And granted, Jay Herbert's such a tough guy. He's able to get out against these lower level guys, go out there, knock him out. Against Francisco Trinaldo, I'm not convinced he does that. So I lean with Trinaldo here. It's just that eventually that age is going to start to show. Like, I know Leo Santos got away with one the other night, but in that second and third round, you were starting to see it start to come out a little bit, you know? So, you know, my boy Trinaldo, I love him, 41 years old, such a badass, and one of my favorite fighters in the lightweight division. I love Trinaldo. I'm just worried here. Like, if I bet on Trinaldo, my biggest worry is that right hand of Jay Herbert, and I'd be screaming, Francisco, take him down. Francisco, please take him down right now. And then if he gets on top, then I'd be like, yes, Francisco. So it's one of those situations where it's like Francisco needs to utilize, you know, bring some tricks out the arsenal, take this guy down and dominate him on the mat. That's your best path to victory here.
I don't disagree with that. I'll just add to close up this segment a couple of numbers and stats out there. I don't know if it's as clear cut as the older guy versus the younger guy. But clearly it is, both on mileage, age, etc. Not disagreeing with the obvious. However, Herbert is 33 years old. He's not like some, you know, young 20-year-old, and he doesn't come from a wrestling, or he wasn't even like playing like soccer or football growing up. Like, the dude started fighting, to his own admission, 7 years ago. You know where Masa Randuba was 7 years ago? Like, knocking dudes like Chad Laprise on their ass, etc., etc. And as well as he does have a nice right hand, and right hands, of course, have a lot of play against a southpaw in an open stance matchup. However, it looks to me that Herbert really needs his jab to establish that right hand. And of course, jabbing lanes get muddied when you face a southpaw. Furthermore, lastly here, I went and looked at from his knockout loss to Reese McKee onward. I couldn't find one southpaw. Forget the level of competition, which you already mentioned, not nearly as high, not even in the same breath as Trinaldo, but he didn't even face one southpaw. So now in this lockdown or, whatever people are facing in the pandemic era, like good southpaws are already hard to find to train with. And now you're going to have one for your UFC debut when you've never faced one and you really rely heavily on striking. Man, I don't know. I know. And McDessie was going to run anyways. That's just how he fights. But about these guys running, part of me is thinking that I think a lot of these guys don't intend on doing it. I don't even know if Alex Hernandez intended on running. I just think that Masaran Duba, like, okay, I'm going to get one in on this old guy, and that first shot lands, and even if it doesn't knock you out, I think these guys feel it, man, and it gives them second thoughts. So it's not that Herbert can't win or his age could very well show. You're totally right in that sense, Dan. There's just so many big ifs for me that doesn't match up to the line. So don't be surprised if you see me look for an angle at this matchup too. Again, check linemovement.com.
Let me say this, because you bring up a fantastic point. No one can deny that he's never fought a southpaw before, since the Rice-McKee fight. So that cannot be denied. But let me also say this, Dan Tom. What's the number one weapon to use against a southpaw? The big right hand. That big right hand. And that's this kid's best weapon. So I'm just saying, you got to be wary of that. But Trinaldo's got a massive edge on the mat. And, since I'm a fan of the guy, I'm rooting for him to go out there and exploit that. Don't get me wrong. I'm not saying he can't win the stand-up. I'm just saying you're going to give this kid a chance to win if you bang with him, is all I'm saying.
Totally.
So, Dan Tom, let's move on to the welterweight division because we got a matchup between Nicholas Dalby, who's taking on the returning Jesse Ronson. And for those that don't know, and I'm sure it's been stated many times, but Jesse Ronson, this is not his first stint in the UFC. He went 0-3, but he went to close split decisions with Kevin Lee, Francisco Trinaldo, Tractor Prazeres. That's serious competition. And then outside the UFC, he goes out there with guys like Nikolai Alexakin, who's one of the best welterweights outside the UFC. He even stopped Troy Lamson in the first round, who the UFC had their eyes on. The UFC was thinking, hey, go out there, get this win over Ronson, and you're in. And Jesse was like, oh, really? Well, now I'm in, because he didn't just, catch Troy Lamson with some fluke. No, he goes out there, knocks down Troy Lamson, takes him down, chokes him out. It was a domination. And Troy Lamson's a kid that, he was 13-1 at one point. People were like, hey, this is a kid that can come to the UFC pretty damn soon, just get a couple more wins. And Jesse Ronson had something to say about that, Dan Tom. So now Jesse Ronson is taking on the very tough Nicholas Dalby. When you look at resumes alone, I mean, with Dalby, we're talking about wins over Elizu Zaleski. We're talking about wins over Alex Cowboy Oliveira. We're talking about a draw with Darren Till. So that already, he's got a better resume than Ronson. It's just that when you examine those fights, they all come down to the wire. And Jesse Ronson is an extremely experienced guy. He competed in all his UFC losses to the wire. So that makes me actually think that this fight is going to play out closer than the line indicates. Now, I do favor Dalby. He's got the welterweight size. He's got some good momentum behind him. But Jesse Ronson ain't just some random new guy that's just going to come out here and take a knee real quick and, we'll be on our way. I think Jesse Ronson is actually going to come out here and try and fight Nicholas Dalby.
Yeah, man. People don't realize Jesse Ronson's been around for a minute. And, when I was talking about kickboxing accolades, obviously there's no K1 top level people on this card, folks. Don't get it twisted. But Jesse Ronson is top 3 as far as kickboxing accolades across the board. People don't realize Ronson actually came from a wrestling base. Unfortunately, doesn't show much in his fights because he's actually losing to wrestlers or strong grapplers outside of Alex Shakin, who, again, listen to Dan there. That's no slouch if you're paying attention to your regional and global fighters. That was no shame. He caught a knee in the first round. That's one of his only TKO losses on Jesse Ronson's record. He is a southpaw who can kickbox. Again, he's got those kickboxing accolades. That's where he does most of his work coming forward. I wanted to see more off of the counter, and I think his countering game is really is what he's going to need to speak most loudest against a guy like Dalby. Dalby's not a D1 wrestler. He's not a judoka. He's not the highest accoladed jiu-jitsu guy, even though this guy's very competent in all areas, Dan. But it's the fact that Dalby pushes a pace and will bring it to guys, even though he doesn't have those grappling backgrounds and accolades. He will get the takedowns. And even though Ronson is underrated in his wrestling, again, it's only to a certain extent. He's good in wrestling in the sense that he can scramble, but he's not using his wrestling to dictate. So a guy that's willing to dictate like Dalby could be problematic if Jesse Ronson doesn't find the counter. Is that read crazy, Dan?
No, not at all. But real quick, I want you to kind of clarify something you were saying. You said something about top 3 kickboxing. Like, can you clarify what you said?
Like as far as I mentioned, accolades for like Francisco Trinaldo's got a lot of kickboxing accolades on this card, and I was hinting toward other people. Another person I was hinting toward was Jesse Ronson on his resume. And again, it's a lot of it's Canadian regional stuff or kickboxing or like smaller sec Thai boxing stuff. Nothing like, again, top level K1. But that's where the guy's strengths are, and I believe that speaks through anybody who's watched Jesse Ronson fight. He loves to get himself into some kickboxing fights.
No, sorry. What I'm asking is, you're saying he was top 3 in Canada or something like that, or
no? As far as like on the card, as far as everybody on the card, I got those little profile cards, the UFC males, and it'll list everybody's accolades. And again, you got to be able to read through what you're reading. Not all black belts are equal. You know what I'm saying? And whatnot. But yeah, Jesse Ronson, I was really surprised at like the long list of like different tournaments, different things he's won and competed in. It surprised me, although it really doesn't. If you watch the guy fight, he loves to kickbox. I'm not sure he's going to get that straight kickboxing match and the type that he prefers. He likes to come forward in combination. He's got some really nice combinations. He goes to the body. Dan, I'm a big fan of going to the body. I think that'll serve him well against Locomotivo here. But yeah, I think Dalby's pace is going to serve him well. Here's an interesting stat, though. We're talking about kickboxing and striking. Dalby's record against southpaws? It's actually the complete opposite of Cowboy Oliveira, the guy he just beat. Dalby is actually
0-3-1.
0-3-1. You nailed it. Yep, he's 0-3-1. So that's kind of a scary thing here.
Wow, that's a great point. And yeah, okay, so you're saying that out of everyone on the card, Jesse's got top 3 kickboxing credentials.
Yes, yes.
That's no joke at all. And I mean, you can tell that last fight goes to the body with the straight left and then goes up top with the right hook and drops his opponent. Very beautiful stuff. And Dalby's been dropped plenty of times throughout his UFC career. I mean, not once, not twice, not thrice, a few times, Dan Tom. So
oh yes,
it could definitely happen again. It's just, once again, I don't justify the -265 line because I feel like this is a fight that, again, is going to come down to the wire. It's going to be 1-1 heading to the 3rd round, and one takedown is going to seal it off for the winner. So, you could go either way. I personally lean towards Dalby. I feel like he's got the momentum behind him. This is his weight class and all that stuff, but it's not going to surprise me one bit if a guy as experienced and seasoned as Jesse Ronson comes in here and gets his first UFC win.
I totally agree with you on that point, which is why I probably got scared away, though initially targeting it as far as maybe possible parlay pieces. I got scared away from that pretty much for the reasons you said there, Dan. I just will add one thing because I mentioned it. Again, I kind of portended it at the beginning of the card. Dalby's another one of these guys who have been openly spoke about past performance anxieties, past adversities. He's a mental health advocate. I'm all about that. I love these guys who are brave enough to speak out about that, but we've also seen it play and hinder their own performances. But back to my theory that I pitched at the beginning of this, those guys have been, it hasn't been smooth sailing one bit. That being said, these are the guys and gals that have been getting the wins. So that's something to watch out for. I'm going to pick Dalby. I'm not as confident in it as the line is suggesting, though, for what that's worth.
And last but not least, we got a featherweight showdown, a grappler's delight, allegedly, Dan Tom, between Movsar Evloev and Mike Grundy. And the reason I say allegedly is because oftentimes when you get 2 wrestlers, especially ones with credentials like these two, sometimes they go out there and stand and bang and see who's got the better striking. So before we even break down this matchup and, try to determine who's the better wrestler, who's going to be more dominant with takedowns, do you think these two are even going to shoot once?
That's really interesting, because there's 2 questions there. Are they going to shoot, and what happens if they do? But to your first question, are they? You know what? I guess I wouldn't be surprised if neither of them do. However, I have an easier time seeing the Grundy side of this equation not shoot, even though Grundy is actually the more accoladed guy on submissions, which we can talk about. Whereas Evloev, I actually would see him shooting more, whether he's successful, whether he thinks he can be successful or not. because Movsar Evloev is a pace fighter. So that's my answer for that one.
Man, great answer. So, the way I kind of view this matchup is I would say that Evloev might be the more complete fighter, and I like the fact that he's got more volume on the feet and he can chain those takedowns like no other, man. And I would also say he could probably drop the bantamweight at some point. I kind of am wondering how he's going to deal with the upper echelon at 45s. There's some big dudes. Calvin Kattar is not. If you made Calvin Kattar drop to 35s, he's cutting his leg off. Is all I'm saying, Dan Tom. So when you get to the upper echelon, size does matter. And Grundy's a big boy. Grundy is going to end his career at 55, not 35. So interestingly enough, I'm curious to see if Evloev comes out here with that same output on the feet like he had against Barzola, or if he is a little bit more hesitant and it does turn into a bit of a more low volume type match, because Grundy can crack. Grundy hits very, very damn hard, and trying to take that guy down is like running into a brick wall, Dan Tom.
Absolutely. And I agree with you on the size point. Although Grundy, depending on where you look, maybe listed as an inch taller. I believe they're both 5'7" with 72-inch reaches. That being said, I agree with you, Dan. Grundy is the bigger, thicker set man. But it's interesting because Evloev is a Greco guy, right? And Greco is only upper body. You're not allowed to use your legs in rule sets. Yet, Greco guys, like you said, are some of the best chainers for whatever reason. You just said it with Evloev. Another underrated guys there, Randy Couture, Cormier, as far as the clench. But they can both, they can both do those. So then we go to the mat wrestling, and Evloev looks great there. You mentioned, Dan, about 135. I'm interested. I think that even though I don't like when a fighter says he doesn't admit that he doesn't have KO power, if he has the durability, pace, and most importantly, wrestling, I'm not against Evloev continuing to go to 145 if 135 is killing him. That being said, I agree with you. He's going to be against a bigger man in Grundy, who also has much more competition and accoladed experience, both wrestling and kind of mat submission grappling. So that'll be interesting if they tie it up, if it gets there. But even me being a wrestling nut, Dan, I'm not going to sit here and tell you this guy's got a clear edge or this guy's got a clear edge, much less tell you that this guy's edge is upwards of -200, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it makes complete sense. I mean, right now, look at the line. We got -200 Evloev. The comeback on Grundy is +170. Actually opened a little bit wider than that, too. So a lot of faith on Evloev. And I mean, I understand why. We used to call this guy Little Khabib, and he fights just like Khabib, a smaller version, and he's still developing his game. And Grundy's this physical bull out there. It's such a great matchup. So let's get to the pick. Who's the analyst taking in this featherweight showdown?
For me, it feels a bit like almost knockout or bust. Even if Grundy is the slightly better submission fighter, even if he's winning the wrestling, Dan, I'm still not sure that he submits or gets Evloev out of there. That being said, Nad Narimani, we're starting to see that perhaps his skill ceiling, the wars he's been through is finally catching up to him. So maybe it wasn't that crazy that Mike Grundy scores his first knockout career against Nad Narimani in a fight where he actually got rocked twice. So for me, I'll go with Evloev. Also, Dan, I'm a bit biased. We got to, spot our own biases and admit them. And I'm really big bias on wrestlers and pace guys. And I like Evloev's boxing. I think he has better boxing technique, not power or athleticism, or maybe even speed. Khabib probably beats him there, even at lightweight. But as far as technique, I love Evloev's head movement, his body work. I think he's a much more skilled boxer than Grundy. Does that mean he can't get caught by Grundy, who's powerful? Of course he can get caught, but I'll take Evloev's pace and better technique down the stretch for a decision win.
Look, I mean, I think you're right about the technique. I do think he's the more active fighter. He's busier, and I think he actually projects higher than what Grundy does. It's just this specific matchup, I think, might be a tough one for him. I feel like he can be stifled in a fight like this, and I feel like he might not be as comfortable or confident letting that volume go against a guy like Grundy, because that power will be coming back. And sometimes with these guys like Grundy, it kind of reminds me of like when Josh Emmett first came into the UFC, and like, yeah, we know how good his power is, but it's like you hit him with your hardest shot. And like, instead of him getting rocked, you break your hand. It's one of those kind of ordeals. I kind of see Grundy being one of those guys. So I feel like this is a situation where it's going to be 1-1 heading to the third round. And this is a split decision type of fight. Now, I could be completely wrong, and maybe Evloev comes out here and dominates, but I do see this being a very close 50-50 coin flip fight. So when I view a fight like that and I see a plus 170, I'm going to go with the dog in this matchup.
Well, whether it's picks or analysis, we didn't agree on everything today, Dan. But once again, I do agree with you on this one. I couldn't have said it better myself there.
I appreciate the kind words, Dan, Tom, everybody listening at home. Let's go ahead and wrap this thing up. Thank you guys so much for your support. Make sure you go to linemovement.com. Follow us on Twitter at line_movement. Let us know your comments down below. Huge shout out to our producer, Jordan, our editors behind the scene. Y'all are the real MVPs. James, Joe, Dan, everybody else. We love you guys. Thank you all so much. And again, to all the listeners and supporters at home, thank you. We truly appreciate it. Everybody stay safe out there and enjoy the fights.
Hey, Line Movement audience, if you like what you saw, be sure to click on the videos linked on the screen.